Sarah Martinez grew up in the roughest neighborhood of Detroit, where gunshots echoed through the night like a deadly lullaby. Her father had abandoned the family when she was just 5 years old, leaving her mother Maria to raise 3 children on a waitress salary that barely covered rent. The cramped apartment they called home had broken windows covered with cardboard and a front door that wouldn't lock properly. Every morning, Sarah walked past drug dealers on street corners and stepped over broken glass to reach the bus stop. Her school was underfunded and overcrowded, with teachers who had given up hope long ago. Most of her classmates dropped out before graduation, either pregnant or caught up in gang activity. The guidance counselor once told Sarah's mother that her daughter was difficult and would likely end up like most kids from their area. But Sarah was different. While other children played in the streets, she spent hours at the public library reading everything she could get her hands on. Books about faraway places, about people who overcame impossible odds, about heroes who fought for what was right. The librarian, Mrs. Thompson, noticed the quiet girl who came in every day after school and started recommending special books for her. Sarah's favorite spot was the corner window where she could watch people walking by while she read. She began to notice patterns in how people moved, how they carried themselves, how their body language told stories their words never would. She could predict which couples would break up based on how they walked together, or which teenagers were carrying weapons by the way they kept one hand near their waist. At home, things were getting worse. Her older brother Miguel had joined a local gang and was bringing dangerous people to their apartment. Her younger sister Carmen was failing school and had started hanging out with the wrong crowd. Their mother worked double shifts but still couldn't make ends meet, and the stress was making her sick. One evening when Sarah was 15, a drive-by shooting happened right outside their building. She was sitting by her bedroom window doing homework when she heard the car speeding down the street. Without thinking, she looked out and watched as the shooter leaned out of the passenger window. In that split second, she noticed everything: the type of car, the license plate numbers, the shooter's face, even the exact angle of the gun. When police arrived an hour later, most neighbors claimed they hadn't seen anything, but Sarah walked up to the detective in charge and gave him a detailed description of everything she had witnessed. She drew a sketch of the shooter's face from memory and provided the complete license plate number. The detective was amazed at her attention to detail and perfect recall. 2 weeks later, the police arrested 3 men based on Sarah's testimony. The detective, Officer James Rodriguez, came back to thank her personally. He told her that her observations had been more accurate than most trained officers could provide. He asked if she had ever considered a career in law enforcement. Sarah laughed at the suggestion. Girls from her neighborhood didn't become police officers. They became teenage mothers, worked minimum wage jobs, or worse. Officer Rodriguez saw the doubt in her eyes and made her a promise. He would help her find a way out if she was willing to work for it. That conversation changed everything for Sarah. She started researching different careers in law enforcement and discovered something that fascinated her: military snipers. These were people who used incredible precision, patience, and observation skills to protect others from great distances. Everything she had been naturally developing through her years of people-watching could be put to use in a meaningful way. But when Sarah mentioned her interest to her family and teachers, the reactions were swift and harsh. Her mother cried, begging her not to even think about joining the military. Her brother Miguel laughed and said she was crazy to think a girl from the projects could become a soldier. Her teachers shook their heads and suggested she focus on more realistic goals like community college or trade school. The worst reaction came from her school counselor, Mr. Peterson, who called her into his office for what he called a reality check. He pulled out statistics about military dropout rates and told her that girls like her, poor, minority from broken homes, didn't make it in elite military positions. He said she should stop dreaming about impossible careers and focus on surviving her current situation. But every discouraging word only made Sarah more determined. She started running every morning before school, building the physical strength she would need. She spent her lunch periods in the computer lab, researching military requirements and training programs. She even convinced Mrs. Thompson to help her find books about military history and sniper techniques. Officer Rodriguez kept his promise and introduced Sarah to a Marine recruiter named Sergeant Lisa Chen. Sergeant Chen had grown up in similar circumstances and understood the challenges Sarah would face. She explained the reality of military life, the demanding training, the physical and mental challenges, the sacrifices required. But she also saw something special in the quiet teenager who asked intelligent questions and listened carefully to every answer. As Sarah's senior year approached, the pressure from everyone around her intensified. Her family needed her to get a job and help with expenses. Her friends thought she was being foolish for even trying. Even some of her teachers continued to discourage her, saying military life was too harsh for someone like her. But Sarah had found her purpose. Every morning when she woke up in that broken-down apartment, every evening when she heard gunshots in the distance, she reminded herself that she was going to be different. She was going to prove that a girl from the streets could become something extraordinary. The night before her 18th birthday, Sarah sat by her window one last time, watching the neighborhood that had shaped her. She thought about all the people who had told her she wouldn't make it, who had tried to convince her to accept a limited life. Tomorrow she would take the first step toward proving them all wrong. She would enlist in the Marines and begin the journey toward becoming one of the most precise marksmen the military had ever seen. Little did anyone know that the girl they had written off would one day save countless lives through her extraordinary skill and unwavering determination. The bus to the Marine Corps recruit depot in San Diego felt like a journey to another planet. Sarah pressed her face against the window as the urban landscape gradually gave way to open highways and distant mountains. She had never been this far from home, and every mile took her further from the world that had tried to define her limits. At the depot, reality hit hard and fast. Drill Sergeant Williams, an intimidating woman with a voice that could shatter glass, immediately singled out the recruits she deemed unlikely to survive training. Sarah, with her slight build and quiet demeanor, became an instant target. The drill sergeant called her Mouse and predicted she would wash out within the first week. The physical challenges were brutal. Sarah had trained every morning for 2 years, but nothing had prepared her for the relentless demands of Marine boot camp. During the first week, she struggled to complete push-ups while bigger, stronger recruits finished with ease. Her pull-up count was embarrassingly low, and she couldn't keep up during long runs in the California heat. But Sarah refused to quit. While other recruits collapsed from exhaustion or broke down crying, she quietly pushed through each challenge. When Drill Sergeant Williams screamed in her face, calling her weak and worthless, Sarah stared straight ahead and absorbed every harsh word without flinching. She had heard worse things about herself back home. The other recruits initially dismissed her as another girl who wouldn't last. Some even made bets about how quickly she would pack her bags and go home. But as weeks passed, they began to notice something different about the quiet girl from Detroit. While they complained about the food, the heat, or the impossible standards, Sarah simply adapted and improved. Her breakthrough came during weapons training. When the recruits were first introduced to the M16 rifle, most struggled with the basic mechanics and safety procedures. Sarah, however, seemed to understand the weapon instinctively. Her hands moved with confidence as she disassembled and reassembled the rifle, and her questions showed a deep understanding of ballistics and marksmanship principles. On the shooting range, something magical happened. Sarah's natural observation skills, honed through years of watching people and patterns in her neighborhood, translated perfectly to marksmanship. She could read wind conditions by watching how dust moved across the range. She noticed tiny details about her rifle's behavior that other recruits missed completely. Her first target practice session was stunning. While most recruits struggled to hit the broadside of a barn, Sarah's shots clustered tightly around the bullseye. The range instructor, Staff Sergeant Martinez, had to check her target twice to believe what he was seeing. Here was a recruit who had never fired a weapon before boot camp, shooting like someone with years of experience. Word about Sarah's shooting ability spread quickly through the training battalion. Drill Sergeant Williams, who had been so dismissive, suddenly took a different interest in her Mouse. The physical training became more intense, but so did the specialized instruction. Sarah found herself receiving extra coaching on advanced marksmanship techniques that weren't normally taught to basic recruits. The mental challenges of boot camp were just as demanding as the physical ones. Recruits were pushed to their psychological breaking points through sleep deprivation, constant pressure, and carefully orchestrated stress situations. Many strong candidates cracked under the mental strain and were sent home. But Sarah's difficult childhood had prepared her for this in ways she never expected. The uncertainty, the verbal abuse, the constant need to stay alert and focused. These were survival skills she had been developing since childhood. While other recruits panicked during high-stress exercises, Sarah remained calm and analytical, treating each challenge as a puzzle to be solved. Her performance during combat simulation exercises was particularly impressive. She had an uncanny ability to spot enemy positions that other recruits missed, and her shot placement was consistently precise even under pressure. The instructors began to take notice of this quiet recruit, who seemed to excel at everything related to marksmanship and tactical awareness. Halfway through boot camp, Sarah received a letter from home that nearly broke her resolve. Her brother Miguel had been arrested in a drug raid, and her mother was begging her to come home and help the family. Carmen, her younger sister, had dropped out of school and was rumored to be using drugs. The family needed her income, her presence, her help in dealing with these crises. That night, Sarah sat alone in the bathroom reading the letter over and over again. She could hear other recruits crying themselves to sleep in the barracks, homesick and overwhelmed. For the first time since arriving at boot camp, she seriously considered quitting. Her family needed her, and she was thousands of miles away playing soldier. But then she remembered Officer Rodriguez's words about finding a way out, and Sergeant Chen's stories about overcoming similar circumstances. She thought about all the people back home who had told her she would never make it, who expected her to fail and return with her tail between her legs. She realized that going home now would trap her in the same cycle that had claimed her siblings. The next morning, Sarah threw herself into training with renewed determination. She wrote a letter to her mother explaining that the best way she could help her family was by succeeding in the Marines. But she also sent half of her small recruit pay home to help with expenses. She wouldn't abandon her family, but she wouldn't abandon her dreams either. As graduation approached, Sarah had transformed from the uncertain girl who had arrived 3 months earlier. Her physical conditioning was now exceptional. Her confidence had grown immensely, and her shooting scores were among the highest in battalion history. Drill Sergeant Williams, who had once called her Mouse, now used her as an example of what determination and focus could accomplish. During the final marksmanship competition, Sarah achieved something extraordinary. She scored a perfect 250 out of 250 possible points, hitting every target dead center from distances that challenged even experienced marksmen. The range instructors had never seen a recruit achieve such precision under competition pressure. At graduation, as Sarah received her Marine Corps emblem, she looked out at the audience and saw Sergeant Chen smiling proudly in the stands. Her mother and Officer Rodriguez had pooled their money to fly out for the ceremony, tears streaming down their faces as they watched the girl everyone had written off become a United States Marine. But this was only the beginning. Sarah's exceptional marksmanship scores had caught the attention of Marine Corps Scout sniper instructors, who were already making plans for her advanced training. The girl from Detroit was about to face her greatest challenge yet. The invitation to Scout Sniper School came 6 months after Sarah's graduation from boot camp. She had been stationed at Camp Pendleton, performing regular Marine duties while her superiors debated whether to recommend her for advanced training. Many questioned if a young woman, especially one with her background, could handle the legendary difficulty of sniper school. Master Sergeant Thompson, the head of the Scout Sniper program, was initially reluctant to accept Sarah into the course. In 20 years of training snipers, he had seen countless Marines fail the demanding program. The physical requirements, mental pressure, and technical complexity eliminated about 80% of candidates. He had never trained a female sniper, and he worried about the additional challenges she might face. But Sarah's range scores were impossible to ignore. Her consistency was remarkable, her attention to detail was extraordinary, and her psychological evaluations showed exceptional mental toughness. Against his better judgment, Master Sergeant Thompson decided to give her a chance, though he privately expected her to wash out within the first few weeks. The first day of sniper school was designed to intimidate. 32 Marines had been selected for the course, all of them experienced infantrymen with excellent service records. Sarah was not only the only woman in the class, but also one of the youngest and least experienced Marines. The other candidates looked at her with mixtures of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed hostility. Gunnery Sergeant Davis, the primary instructor, made it clear from the beginning that he would show no special consideration for anyone. His opening speech was brutal in its honesty about the failure rate and the demands that lay ahead. He looked directly at Sarah when he mentioned that the course would break anyone who wasn't completely committed to excellence. The first weeks focused on fieldcraft and camouflage. Students learned to move invisibly through different terrains, to construct hiding positions that could fool trained observers, and to remain motionless for hours at a time. Sarah's small size, which had been a disadvantage in some areas of basic training, now became an asset. She could squeeze into concealment positions that larger Marines couldn't use, and her natural patience served her well during long observation exercises. But the academic portion of the course proved challenging for many students, including Sarah. The mathematics of long-range shooting were complex, involving calculations for wind speed, air density, temperature, and bullet drop over various distances. Students had to memorize ballistic tables, learn to read weather conditions, and understand the technical specifications of different weapons and ammunition types. Sarah struggled initially with the advanced mathematics, having never received strong preparation in her underfunded high school. While classmates with college backgrounds breezed through the calculations, she spent extra hours every night working with a calculator and reference books. Master Sergeant Thompson noticed her staying late in the classroom and quietly arranged for additional tutoring, though he made it clear this was standard procedure for any struggling student. The psychological pressure was relentless. Instructors constantly reminded students that real snipers operated alone, often behind enemy lines, where a single mistake could mean death for themselves or their fellow Marines. They had to demonstrate not just shooting ability, but also perfect judgment, emotional control, and the mental strength to take a human life when necessary. During one particularly intense exercise, students were required to maintain surveillance of a target area for 48 hours straight, taking detailed notes on all activity while remaining completely hidden. Sarah positioned herself in a carefully constructed hide overlooking the training area, covered with natural vegetation and designed to be invisible from any angle. For 2 days and nights, she watched and recorded every movement in the target zone. Other students grew restless, made small movements that revealed their positions, or lost focus during the long hours of seemingly uneventful observation. Sarah remained perfectly still, her trained eyes catching details that others missed, her notes precise and comprehensive. When the exercise ended, the instructors were amazed by the quality of her intelligence report. She had identified several enemy personnel that other students had completely missed, accurately counted ammunition supplies, and even detected a decoy position that was designed to fool the observers. Master Sergeant Thompson began to reconsider his initial doubts about her potential. The physical demands of sniper training were different from basic combat conditioning. Students had to carry heavy equipment over long distances, often crawling for miles through difficult terrain while maintaining their weapons and optical equipment in perfect condition. Sarah's smaller frame made the equipment loads proportionally heavier for her, but she refused to accept any modifications or assistance. Her determination impressed even the most skeptical classmates. During a particularly grueling exercise that required students to stalk within 200 yards of an observer post without being detected, Sarah spent 6 hours crawling through brush and rocky ground. Her knees and elbows were bloody by the end. Her uniform was shredded, but she had successfully approached the target undetected while several larger, stronger Marines had been spotted and eliminated from the exercise. The shooting portions of the training pushed students to their absolute limits. They fired from awkward positions in adverse weather conditions and under extreme time pressure. Sarah's natural marksmanship ability continued to shine, but now she had to demonstrate that skill while exhausted, stressed, and operating with equipment that was far more sophisticated than basic infantry weapons. Her first attempt at a 1,000-yard shot was a moment of truth. The target was barely visible through the high-powered scope and wind conditions were challenging. Sarah had to calculate multiple variables, adjust her position for optimal stability, control her breathing and heartbeat, and execute a perfect trigger pull. The other students watched silently as she made her final adjustments and slowly squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, striking dead center at a distance that many experienced marksmen found challenging. But Master Sergeant Thompson wasn't satisfied with a single success. He ordered her to repeat the shot 4 more times, each time hitting the target precisely. Word began to spread through the Marine Corps about the female recruit who was shooting like a seasoned professional. As the course progressed into its final phases, the pressure intensified. Students who had made it this far were the cream of the crop, but only the very best would graduate and earn the title of Marine Corps Scout Sniper. The final exercises would test everything they had learned under the most demanding conditions possible. Sarah had not only survived the training that eliminated most of her classmates, she was excelling in ways that amazed her instructors. But the greatest challenges still lay ahead, and everyone knew that the final weeks of sniper school would determine who had what it took to join one of the military's most elite units. The girl from Detroit was about to face the ultimate test of her skills, determination, and mental toughness. The final phase of sniper school was called the Crucible, and it lived up to its reputation. Only 12 Marines remained from the original class of 32, and these survivors would face the most demanding test of their training. They would be dropped into a realistic combat simulation where every skill they had learned would be tested under maximum pressure. Sarah felt the weight of expectation as the exercise began. Master Sergeant Thompson had quietly spread word about her exceptional performance, and senior Marine Corps officers were now watching her progress with great interest. Some saw her as a groundbreaking pioneer who could open new opportunities for women in combat roles. Others viewed her as a risky experiment that could end in embarrassing failure. The final exercise lasted 1 week and simulated a deep reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines. Students were divided into 2-person teams and given specific targets to eliminate while gathering intelligence on enemy positions. They would be hunted by a full company of Marines playing the role of enemy forces, supported by helicopters and dogs trained to detect human presence. Sarah was paired with Corporal Jake Morrison, a seasoned Marine from Texas who had initially been among her harshest critics. Morrison had grown up hunting and considered himself an expert marksman, but Sarah's performance during training had grudgingly earned his respect. Still, he worried that her inexperience in actual field conditions might compromise their mission. Their target was a simulated enemy command post located 15 miles behind friendly lines. They had to infiltrate undetected, gather detailed intelligence on the facility, eliminate specific high-value targets, and then escape without being captured. The exercise was designed to be nearly impossible, with multiple layers of security and patrols constantly searching for infiltrators. The first challenge was simply reaching the target area without detection. Sarah and Morrison had to travel cross-country through varied terrain while carrying full combat loads of weapons, ammunition, communication equipment, and survival supplies. They moved only at night, hiding during daylight hours in carefully prepared positions. Sarah's fieldcraft skills, developed through months of intensive training, proved exceptional. She seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how to use terrain and natural cover to remain invisible, while Morrison, despite his experience, occasionally made small mistakes that could have revealed their position. Sarah moved like a ghost through the landscape. On the second night, they encountered their first serious challenge. A patrol of 6 Marines was conducting a sweep of the area they needed to cross. Sarah and Morrison lay motionless in a shallow depression, covered with camouflage netting and natural vegetation. The patrol passed within 10 feet of their position, with one Marine stepping directly over Sarah's legs. For 30 minutes, the 2 snipers remained perfectly still while the patrol searched the immediate area. Sarah could feel her heart pounding, but her breathing remained controlled and silent. She had learned to compartmentalize fear and stress, treating dangerous situations as technical problems to be solved, rather than emotional crises to be survived. When they finally reached the target area on the 4th night, Sarah's reconnaissance skills came into full play. The simulated enemy command post was heavily defended, with multiple guard positions, roving patrols, and sophisticated surveillance equipment. Sarah spent 6 hours observing the facility, mapping guard rotations, identifying weaknesses in the security perimeter, and locating their primary targets. Her patience and attention to detail revealed patterns that Morrison had missed. She noticed that one guard position was left unmanned for exactly 4 minutes during each shift change, creating a narrow window of opportunity. She also identified a concealed sniper position that could have compromised their mission if they had approached from the most obvious direction. The actual shooting portion of the exercise would test everything Sarah had learned about long-range marksmanship under combat conditions. Their primary target was located 800 yards from the nearest concealment that offered a clear shot. They would have one opportunity to engage before enemy forces would pinpoint their location and mount a massive response. Sarah spent hours preparing for the shot. She studied wind patterns, calculated bullet drop, and rehearsed her breathing and trigger control. The target was a mannequin dressed in enemy uniform, positioned behind partial cover that left only a small portion visible to the sniper. A miss or a non-fatal hit would result in automatic failure for the exercise. When the moment came, Sarah felt the familiar calm that had carried her through every challenge of her military training. Her childhood experiences with stress and uncertainty had prepared her for moments like this, when everything depended on perfect execution under extreme pressure. She controlled her breathing, aligned the crosshairs precisely, and squeezed the trigger with practiced perfection. The shot was flawless. The target dropped immediately, and Sarah and Morrison immediately began their planned escape route. But the exercise wasn't over. They now had to evade capture while traveling 15 miles back to friendly territory, pursued by helicopters, tracking dogs, and ground forces that knew their general location. The escape portion of the exercise pushed both Marines to their absolute limits. They moved constantly for 3 days, sleeping in 2-hour shifts and living on minimal rations while staying ahead of their pursuers. Sarah's small size again proved advantageous as she could hide in spaces that would never accommodate larger Marines. On the final day, exhausted and pushed beyond normal human endurance, they encountered a situation that wasn't part of the planned exercise. A real emergency had occurred when a training helicopter crashed several miles from their position. The exercise was immediately suspended, and all personnel were redirected to search and rescue operations. Sarah and Morrison were among the closest units to the crash site, and they were ordered to proceed immediately to assist with casualty evacuation. This was no longer a training exercise. Real lives were at stake, and their actions would have genuine consequences. When they reached the crash site, they found 3 injured Marines trapped in difficult terrain. One had a severe leg fracture, another had internal injuries from the impact, and the third had suffered a concussion and was disoriented. The rescue helicopters couldn't land in the rocky area, and ground vehicles couldn't reach the location. Sarah's medical training, which was part of sniper school curriculum, became crucial. She helped stabilize the injured Marines while Morrison coordinated with rescue teams. Her calm demeanor and precise actions under pressure impressed the rescue personnel, who later commented that her professionalism exceeded that of many experienced combat medics. The successful completion of the rescue operation overshadowed the original training exercise, but Sarah's performance throughout the week had been carefully observed and evaluated. Master Sergeant Thompson had received detailed reports from all the instructors and opposing force personnel involved in the exercise. When the final scores were calculated, Sarah had achieved the highest overall rating in her class. Her marksmanship scores were perfect, her fieldcraft was exceptional, and her performance under pressure had exceeded all expectations. She had not only survived the legendary difficulty of Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, she had excelled beyond what anyone thought possible. At the graduation ceremony, as Sarah received her sniper badge and was officially designated as a Marine Corps Scout Sniper, Master Sergeant Thompson made a brief speech. He admitted that he had initially doubted whether she belonged in the program, but her performance had proven that excellence could come from the most unexpected sources. Sarah had become the first female graduate of Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, but more importantly, she had proven that determination and skill could overcome any background or circumstance. The girl who had been told she would never make it was now one of the most precisely trained marksmen in the world. Sarah's first deployment came 8 months after graduating from sniper school. The Marines were sending a reconnaissance unit to Afghanistan, where Taliban forces were increasing their attacks on coalition bases. Sarah would be attached to a forward operating base near the Pakistan border, one of the most dangerous assignments in the entire theater of operations. The flight to Afghanistan gave Sarah time to reflect on how far she had come. 2 years earlier, she had been just another teenager from a broken neighborhood, written off by everyone who knew her. Now she was a trained Marine sniper, carrying specialized equipment worth more than her family's annual income, heading into combat with skills that few people in the world possessed. Her arrival at Forward Operating Base Chapman caused quite a stir. Word had already spread through military channels about the first female Marine sniper, and everyone wanted to see if she could perform in actual combat conditions. Some Marines welcomed her with genuine curiosity and respect, while others remained skeptical about whether a woman could handle the physical and psychological demands of combat. Captain Michael Stevens, the company commander, was among the skeptics. He had requested an experienced sniper team to support his operations, and instead he received a young woman with no combat experience. During their first briefing, he made it clear that he expected her to prove herself before he would trust her with critical missions. Sarah's spotter and partner was Staff Sergeant David Chen, a veteran with 3 previous deployments and an exceptional reputation for tactical intelligence. Chen had volunteered to work with Sarah partly out of curiosity, and partly because he believed in giving everyone a fair chance to prove their worth. Their success or failure would depend heavily on how well they could work together under pressure. The base was located in a valley surrounded by mountains that provided perfect positions for enemy snipers and rocket attacks. Coalition forces were constantly under threat from Taliban fighters who knew the terrain intimately and could strike from concealment before disappearing into the rocky landscape. Several Marines had been killed by enemy snipers in the previous month, and morale was beginning to suffer. Sarah's first week was spent learning the local terrain and establishing relationships with the other Marines in her unit. She studied maps, aerial photographs, and intelligence reports about enemy activity patterns. She also spent hours on the base's shooting range, adjusting to the different atmospheric conditions and ensuring her equipment was perfectly calibrated for the local environment. Her opportunity to prove herself came sooner than expected. On her 8th day at the base, a patrol was pinned down by sniper fire from a ridgeline approximately 200 yards away. The enemy position was well concealed among the rocks, and return fire from the patrol's standard weapons was ineffective at such range. 3 Marines had already been wounded, and the situation was becoming desperate. Captain Stevens reluctantly authorized Sarah and Staff Sergeant Chen to attempt a counter-sniper mission. They had to locate the enemy position, approach within effective range without being detected, and eliminate the threat before more Marines were killed. The entire base was watching to see how the untested female sniper would perform under combat pressure. Sarah felt the familiar calm descend over her as she prepared for the mission. This was what all her training had been leading toward, a moment when her skills could save the lives of fellow Marines. She methodically checked her equipment, studied the terrain, and planned her approach route while Chen gathered intelligence from the pinned-down patrol. The approach to the enemy position took 3 hours of careful movement through rocky terrain. Sarah and Chen had to cross open ground while remaining invisible to an enemy sniper, who was actively hunting for targets. Sarah's small size again proved advantageous as she could use concealment that wouldn't hide larger Marines. When they finally reached a position with a clear view of the enemy sniper's location, Sarah faced her first real combat shot. The target was partially concealed behind rocks with only portions of his head and shoulder visible through her scope. Wind conditions were tricky, and the angle of the shot required precise calculations for bullet trajectory. Sarah took her time, controlling her breathing and heart rate while studying the target through her scope. She could see the enemy sniper's rifle barrel protruding from behind the rocks, and occasionally caught glimpses of his face as he searched for targets among the trapped patrol. This wasn't a training exercise or a competition. This was a human being who was trying to kill her fellow Marines. The moral weight of taking a life had been thoroughly addressed during sniper training, but facing it in reality was different. Sarah thought about the wounded Marines who were counting on her, about the families back home who wanted their sons to come back safely, about her own journey from the streets of Detroit to this mountainside in Afghanistan. When she pulled the trigger, the shot was perfect. The enemy sniper dropped immediately, and the threat to the pinned patrol was eliminated. Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that she had succeeded, sadness at taking a life, and professional satisfaction at executing her mission flawlessly. Chen confirmed the kill through his spotting scope and immediately began planning their withdrawal route. The success of Sarah's first combat mission changed everything at the base. Captain Stevens publicly commended her performance, and the Marines who had been skeptical about her abilities began treating her with genuine respect. Word spread quickly through military communication networks that the female sniper had performed perfectly under combat pressure. Over the following weeks, Sarah participated in numerous missions that showcased different aspects of her training. She provided overwatch for patrol operations, eliminated enemy positions that threatened convoy routes, and gathered intelligence through long-range surveillance missions. Her shooting record remained perfect. Every shot resulted in a confirmed kill when lethal force was authorized, but her most significant contribution came during a complex operation to capture a high-value Taliban leader. Intelligence indicated that the target would be meeting with subordinates at a compound in a nearby village. Sarah and Chen were positioned on a hillside overlooking the compound, tasked with preventing the target's escape if the primary assault team was compromised. The operation began perfectly, with assault teams moving into position under cover of darkness, but Taliban sentries discovered the approaching Marines, and a firefight erupted throughout the village. The primary target and several associates attempted to flee through a series of back alleys and rooftops. Sarah found herself facing multiple moving targets at various ranges, all in poor lighting conditions with friendly forces operating nearby. She had to make split-second decisions about which targets posed the greatest threats while ensuring she didn't accidentally engage friendly personnel. The complexity of the situation went far beyond anything she had trained for. In the span of 10 minutes, Sarah engaged 6 different targets with perfect precision. Each shot was carefully aimed to neutralize threats while avoiding collateral damage to civilians or friendly forces. Her performance during this chaotic engagement demonstrated not just marksmanship skills, but also exceptional judgment and tactical awareness under extreme pressure. The successful completion of this operation earned Sarah recognition at the highest levels of Marine Corps command. Her perfect shooting record, combined with her tactical intelligence and professional demeanor, was establishing her reputation as one of the most effective snipers ever deployed in the region. But combat was also taking its psychological toll. Sarah found herself having difficulty sleeping, haunted by the faces of the men she had killed. The moral complexity of her role as a sniper, protecting her fellow Marines while taking lives from great distances, was more challenging than any physical or technical aspect of her training. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had become both a trusted partner and mentor, helped Sarah work through these psychological challenges. He explained that every experienced combat veteran struggled with similar issues, and that seeking help was a sign of strength rather than weakness. The base chaplain and medical personnel provided additional support as Sarah learned to cope with the realities of combat. As her deployment continued, Sarah's reputation grew beyond her immediate unit. Special operations commanders began requesting her services for high-priority missions, and intelligence analysts sought her input on enemy sniper tactics. The girl from Detroit had become one of the most valued assets in the entire theater of operations. 3 months into her deployment, Sarah received orders for her most challenging mission yet. Intelligence had identified a Taliban sniper known as the Ghost, who had killed 17 coalition soldiers over the past 6 months. This enemy marksman was extraordinarily skilled, striking from impossible ranges and disappearing without a trace before counter-sniper teams could respond. The Ghost operated in a mountainous region where previous attempts to locate him had failed catastrophically. 2 sniper teams had been sent after him, and both had been eliminated with single, precise shots from distances exceeding 1,500 yards. The enemy sniper seemed to anticipate every tactical approach and always maintained the advantage of terrain and positioning. Colonel Patricia Williams, the regional commander, personally briefed Sarah on the mission. The intelligence community believed the Ghost was actually a former military sniper, possibly trained by foreign special forces, who had joined the Taliban after becoming radicalized. His exceptional skills and intimate knowledge of Western sniper tactics made him nearly impossible to counter using conventional approaches. Sarah studied everything available about the Ghost's previous attacks. She analyzed the ballistics evidence, examined photographs of the attack sites, and interviewed survivors who had witnessed his strikes. A pattern began to emerge that previous analysts had missed. The Ghost always chose positions that offered multiple escape routes, but he also seemed to prefer locations with specific environmental characteristics. Staff Sergeant Chen was initially reluctant to support this mission. He had worked with the 2 previous sniper teams that had been killed, and he knew firsthand how dangerous the ghost could be. But Sarah's analytical approach and perfect combat record had earned his complete confidence. If anyone could succeed where others had failed, it would be his partner. The mission required them to operate independently for up to 2 weeks in extremely hostile territory. They would have no communication with base except for emergency situations, no backup support if things went wrong, and no extraction plan if they were discovered by enemy forces. Success depended entirely on their ability to locate and eliminate the ghost before he detected their presence. Sarah's preparation for this mission was more thorough than anything she had done before. She spent days studying topographical maps, weather patterns, and historical data about enemy movement in the target area. She also modified some of her equipment, adding specialized camouflage materials and adjusting her rifle configuration for the extreme ranges she might encounter. The infiltration took place during a moonless night, with Sarah and Chen being dropped by helicopter 15 miles from their target area. They carried enough supplies for 3 weeks, understanding that the mission might take longer than anticipated. The weight of their equipment was enormous, but both Marines were in peak physical condition from months of combat operations. Their first challenge was simply reaching the operational area without being detected by Taliban patrols or sympathetic villagers who might report their presence. The terrain was brutal, steep mountain trails, loose rock that could cause noise or injury, and unpredictable weather that could expose them to observation from great distances. Sarah's fieldcraft skills, refined through months of combat experience, were now operating at an extraordinary level. She could read the landscape like a book, identifying safe routes and dangerous exposures with an intuition that impressed even Chen. They moved like ghosts themselves, leaving no trace of their passage and avoiding all contact with local populations. After 4 days of careful movement, they reached the area where the ghost was believed to operate. Sarah began the painstaking process of analyzing terrain to predict where the enemy sniper might position himself for future attacks. She used her understanding of sniper tactics, combined with intelligence about upcoming coalition operations, to narrow down the most likely locations. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the ghost wasn't just choosing positions based on tactical advantages. He was also selecting sites that had cultural or historical significance to local Taliban fighters. This psychological insight allowed her to predict his behavior in ways that purely tactical analysis had missed. Sarah identified 3 locations where the ghost was most likely to position himself for an attack on a coalition convoy, scheduled to pass through the area in 2 days. She and Chen established observation posts covering all 3 sites, prepared to wait as long as necessary for their target to appear. The wait tested every aspect of their training and mental toughness. For 36 hours, they remained motionless in carefully constructed hide positions, taking turns observing the target areas through high-powered scopes while the other rested. They survived on minimal food and water, using techniques learned in sniper school to maintain alertness despite physical discomfort. On the morning of the convoy operation, Sarah detected movement at the most distant of the 3 locations. Through her scope, she could see a figure carefully constructing a sniper position among the rocks. The range was extraordinary, nearly 1,800 yards, but she was confident this was the ghost preparing for his attack. The tactical situation was incredibly complex. The ghost was positioned to attack the convoy, but he was also in an ideal location to engage Sarah if she revealed her position by taking a shot. She would have one opportunity to eliminate him before he could respond, and the extreme range made success uncertain even for a marksman of her caliber. Sarah spent 2 hours studying the shot, calculating variables for wind, air density, temperature, and the complex ballistics of such an extreme range. She also had to time her shot perfectly. Too early and the ghost might escape. Too late and the convoy would be attacked. The pressure was unlike anything she had experienced even in her previous combat engagements. The wind conditions were particularly challenging. Mountain terrain created unpredictable air currents that could deflect a bullet by several feet at such distances. Sarah watched grass movement, dust patterns, and even the behavior of birds to understand the wind conditions along the entire flight path of her bullet. She made minute adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for factors that most snipers never had to consider. The psychological pressure was immense. This wasn't just another combat engagement. This was a direct confrontation with a legendary enemy who had already killed 2 sniper teams. Sarah knew that military commanders, intelligence analysts, and her fellow Marines were depending on her success. Failure would mean more coalition deaths and proof that the ghost was truly untouchable. But as Sarah prepared for the shot, she felt the same calm that had carried her through every challenge since leaving Detroit. She thought about the Marines in the approaching convoy who were counting on her protection, about her fallen comrades who had died trying to accomplish this same mission, and about everyone back home who had believed she could achieve the impossible. When the moment came, Sarah controlled her breathing, aligned her crosshairs with mathematical precision, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The shot seemed to take forever to reach its target across the vast distance of mountain terrain. She watched through her scope as the bullet traveled its perfect arc, carrying with it months of preparation, years of training, and a lifetime of determination. The result was flawless. The ghost dropped immediately, his weapon falling among the rocks where he had been preparing to attack the convoy. Sarah had eliminated the most dangerous enemy sniper in the region, with a single shot at a range that exceeded even her own previous accomplishments. The impossible mission had been completed with the same precision that had characterized every shot of her military career. But the mission wasn't over. They now had to confirm the kill and extract from the area before Taliban forces responded to investigate. The approach to the ghost's position took 6 hours of dangerous movement across exposed terrain, with Chen providing overwatch while Sarah advanced to verify their success. When Sarah reached the enemy position, she found confirmation that they had indeed eliminated the ghost. The deceased sniper was carrying identification and equipment that matched intelligence reports, and his weapon bore distinctive markings that had been observed at previous attack sites. More importantly, documents in his possession revealed information about planned Taliban operations that would save many coalition lives. The extraction was harrowing, with Taliban forces conducting an intensive search for whoever had killed their most valuable sniper. Sarah and Chen spent 3 days evading capture while moving toward their extraction point, using every skill they had learned to stay ahead of their pursuers. Helicopters circled overhead constantly, and ground patrols swept through valleys and ridgelines in a desperate attempt to locate them. During the escape, Sarah's small size again proved advantageous. She could hide in rock crevices and cave openings that wouldn't conceal larger Marines, and her ability to move silently over difficult terrain kept them ahead of their pursuers. Chen later said that watching Sarah navigate the treacherous mountain landscape while carrying full combat equipment was like watching a masterclass in fieldcraft. When they finally reached safety, Sarah's accomplishment sent shockwaves through the military intelligence community. She had succeeded where multiple previous attempts had failed, eliminating a target that had been considered nearly impossible to counter. Her shot distance was among the longest confirmed kills in military history, achieved under combat conditions that would challenge even the most experienced snipers. The success of this mission established Sarah as one of the most accomplished snipers in modern military history. But more than the technical achievement, her success had broken a psychological barrier that had been affecting coalition operations throughout the region. The invincible enemy sniper had been defeated, and morale improved dramatically across all coalition forces. Word of Sarah's achievement spread quickly through military networks and eventually reached the highest levels of command. The girl from Detroit who had been told she would never amount to anything had just accomplished one of the most difficult sniper missions in military history, proving once again that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle. Sarah's elimination of the ghost marked the turning point of her deployment, but it also brought unexpected consequences. News of her extraordinary shot spread far beyond military circles, reaching media outlets and government officials back home. The story of a young woman from Detroit who had become one of the world's most accomplished snipers captured public imagination and sparked debates about women in combat roles. The attention made Sarah uncomfortable. She had never sought fame or recognition. She simply wanted to serve her country and protect her fellow Marines. But military leadership recognized the value of her story for recruitment and public relations. Against her preferences, she found herself participating in interviews and photo sessions that would be used to inspire other young people to consider military service. More importantly, her success had practical implications for military operations. Coalition commanders began requesting her services for the most critical missions. Understanding that her unique combination of skills and proven performance under pressure, made her invaluable for certain types of operations. Her reputation preceded her wherever she was deployed. During her final months in Afghanistan, Sarah participated in operations that showcased the full range of her capabilities. She provided precision support for special operations raids, eliminated high-value targets that threatened coalition forces, and trained other snipers in advanced techniques she had developed through combat experience. Her perfect shooting record remained intact. 47 confirmed kills without a single miss when lethal force was authorized. But the psychological toll of combat was accumulating. Sarah found herself struggling with nightmares, anxiety attacks, and periods of depression that she couldn't shake through willpower alone. The faces of the men she had killed haunted her dreams, and she began questioning whether the violence she inflicted was truly justified, even in service of protecting her fellow Marines. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had become like a big brother to her, recognized the signs of combat stress and convinced Sarah to seek help from the base medical team. The military psychologist explained that her reactions were normal responses to extraordinary circumstances, and that seeking treatment was essential for her long-term mental health and continued effectiveness as a Marine. Therapy helped Sarah understand that her moral struggles were actually evidence of her humanity and ethical grounding. The fact that taking lives troubled her, even when necessary and legally justified, showed that she maintained the moral compass that separated professional soldiers from mere killers. Learning to live with these burdens was part of the price of serving in combat roles. As her deployment neared its end, Sarah received news that would change her life again. The Marine Corps was creating a new program to train the next generation of scout snipers, and they wanted her to serve as a primary instructor. She would return to the United States to help establish advanced training protocols based on lessons learned from recent combat operations. The opportunity excited Sarah because it would allow her to share her knowledge with other Marines while stepping back from the direct violence of combat operations. She had proven everything she needed to prove about her capabilities, and now she could contribute to military effectiveness in a different way while preserving her mental health. Her farewell from Afghanistan was emotional. The Marines she had served with understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just exceptional marksmanship, but a demonstration of how determination and skill could overcome any background or circumstance. Many of them credited Sarah with saving their lives through her precision and professionalism. Captain Stevens, who had initially doubted her abilities, made a point of personally thanking her before her departure. He admitted that his skepticism had been based on prejudice rather than objective assessment, and that Sarah's performance had changed his perspective on women in combat roles permanently. Her success had opened doors for other women who would follow in her footsteps. Back in the United States, Sarah's transition to instructor duties proved challenging in different ways. She had to learn how to communicate her instinctive skills to students who came from very different backgrounds and possessed varying levels of natural ability. Teaching forced her to analyze and articulate techniques that had become second nature through years of intensive practice. Her reputation attracted top-quality students from throughout the Marine Corps and other military branches. Many officers requested assignment to her courses specifically to learn from the sniper, who had achieved legendary status through her combat performance. Sarah found satisfaction in watching her students develop skills that would keep them alive in future conflicts. But perhaps her greatest impact came through the young people who approached her after speaking engagements at high schools and colleges. Many were kids from backgrounds similar to her own, poor minority from broken families, who had been told they couldn't achieve anything significant. Sarah's story gave them hope and practical examples of how education, discipline, and determination could transform their lives. She always made time for these conversations, remembering her own teenage years when she had desperately needed someone to show her that escape from her circumstances was possible. She established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students pursuing military careers, using income from her speaking engagements and military awards to help others follow similar paths. 5 years after her return from Afghanistan, Sarah was promoted to Master Sergeant and given command of the Marine Corps' premier sniper training facility. She had revolutionized training methods, incorporated lessons learned from recent combat operations, and established new standards for precision and professionalism that influenced military practices worldwide. Her personal life had also stabilized. She married a fellow Marine she had met during training operations, started a family, and found ways to balance her military career with personal happiness. The nightmares from combat had faded with time and continued therapy, replaced by pride in her service and excitement about her contributions to military training. The transformation was complete. The girl from Detroit who everyone said wouldn't make it had not only survived and thrived in one of the military's most demanding specialties, but had become a leader and inspiration for the next generation. Her story proved that excellence could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when combined with determination, proper training, and opportunities to demonstrate capability. Sarah's legacy extended far beyond her individual achievements. She had opened doors for women in combat roles, revolutionized sniper training methods, and inspired countless young people to pursue goals that others considered impossible. Most importantly, she had proven that society's tendency to write off certain people based on their backgrounds was both wrong and wasteful. The perfect kills that had made her famous were only part of her story. The real victory was the life she had built through refusing to accept the limitations others tried to impose on her, and the positive impact she continued to have on everyone whose lives she touched. She had become living proof that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it might appear to others.